Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Gary here at Young in Faith. I am so excited for this episode. You're about to get ready to hear from one of my favorite two people, Rose and Katie. And listen, they're about to drop the bomb with a great conversation talking about public schools and Christian schools and the struggle that students actually deal with inside schools. And I know this could be a tough topic for a lot of people, but I truly believe that God has a word for you to speak through them to hit home for you on whatever you're dealing with. So I pray that this episode impacts you. And if it does, drop some comments below. Send this to someone that needs to hear it because this will change your life.
Hey guys, welcome back to Young in Faith. I'm really excited that you guys are here. There is going to be some awesome conversation happening today. This is actually our second time filming this, so listen, it's going to be on point, okay? So this is Rose. Let's introduce yourself and say hi.
Hi guys, my name is Rose. I'm so happy to be here today for a second time. This is really exciting. I just graduated and I will be going to the University of Miami in a month, so that's really exciting. I've been to private Christian schools all my life, so I've kind of grown up around the church in a Christian family and everything, so I feel like that kind of gave me a different perspective going into my faith. And over these past few years, I've been a lot more intentional about, making my relationship with God more personal and intentional and like my own choice rather than just something I was always surrounded by. So that being said, I feel like I've encountered a lot of different things at these Christian schools that people may not have assumed if they don't go to a Christian school.
Yeah.
And that everybody kind of has this idea of, oh, everyone that goes to a Christian school is maybe a Christian, but that's really not true. So,
Yeah. So she kind of like put us right on topic, which is cool because what our topic of conversation is going to be today is what it's like growing up in Christian schools compared to public schools, what kind of obstacles that they face compared to public school, and are they the same actually? So I think that's really cool. A little bit of my story is that I went to private school when I was in 5th and 6th grade, and I learned a lot of things that were of the world when I was in that school, and it just kind of showed me how I didn't want to be. And it actually caused me to step away in faith. So I want to hear a little bit of some of the things of struggles that you've experienced in a Christian school that you've never been to a public school, right?
I've never been to a public
Okay,
school.
so we're going to kind of collab on that, all right? Because I went to public school for a while.
Yeah.
So in Christian school, what are some of the, let's say the top three things that you've noticed was character changing or just real earthly and worldly views?
Yeah, so I would say one thing on, I guess, a more negative side would be that I went into several different Christian schools really because I moved states, I just changed schools and things like that, and I noticed that a lot of students there, they will think that because they go to a Christian school, they've checked that box off the list basically, where it's like, okay, I go here, that means I'm a Christian, I'm good. I'm allowed to do whatever I want to. But I'm allowed to call myself a Christian because I go here because they read the Bible for whatever assignments they have to for Bible class, or because they attend whatever chapel services we have on Wednesdays. And so then they have to listen to and sing the worship and listen to the messages while we're there. So they do what has to be done there at school, and they think that that's enough to keep them Christian, basically. But then as soon as school is out, or even sometimes in school too, they start doing things that are very not Christian, right? And they don't display the fruits, and they don't have their own personal relationship with God that's intentional. They just do whatever they have to do. So I think that could be really dangerous, not only for themselves, of course, but also for anybody who maybe went from a public school to a Christian school thinking, oh, I'm going to be able to be surrounded by Christians here, but that's just not the reality of it.
Wow. I know I want 2 more points from you because they're going to be great. But it's really interesting because last night at my local church, we heard an incredible message by Ashley Brindle, and she spoke about how if you love Jesus, you are all in or you're all out. And she was talking about how God's grace is a gift, and it was paid by the blood of Jesus. And so a lot of us, I know I did at a certain point, I was like, oh, well, I'm saved, so it is what it is. I said the prayer, I'm good, I can go party on the weekend and do what I need to Monday through Saturday, but on Sunday I'm a praise Jesus, you know what I'm saying? But it's just not how it is, and it really just shows bad fruit, like you said, because we are representing Christ, like to be a Christian, that's what that means, is to follow Christ. Like that's what it is. And so yeah, that's just sad, but at the same time I could relate.
Yeah.
Because I went through that. So what are two more things that you're like, oh dang?
So I would say that one thing, maybe on like more of a positive note, something that I was able to experience there was that being at a Christian school, you know, most teachers and, you know, faculty members there, you would hope are Christian, right? They're supposed to be Christians. But that being said, like, there are a lot of leadership roles that you could step into at a Christian school that might prepare you so that whatever you're doing in school to help lead other students, you know, more towards Christ, you're able to carry that on outside of school as well for those students who do go to Christian school who do actually want to be serious about their faith. So I know that, you know, the schools that I've been to, especially in my last 2 years of high school, I was able to step into some roles like being a spiritual life prefect, where basically as a senior I was able to work with the student body and then the spiritual life directors at our school to help organize some chapel events, figure out what's the best way that we can outreach all the students in our school to kind of get them to want to build a relationship with God, right? How is the best way to communicate with them and connect with them in a way where it's different from how we've been doing it, you know, every other week at chapel, because clearly that's not going to work for every student. So what can we do that's different? And in doing so, I had to be really open and outward about my faith with my friends at school. And I think that one of the hardest things, you know, being a teenager, especially, you know, a high schooler here in America, with how culture is and how it's very, you know, counter to the Bible, it's so easy to not want to be open about your faith with all of your friends, especially in school, if they're not acting like it. So to be in that kind of leadership role in school, in a Christian school, that kind of made, you know, forced me to be open about my faith in front of the people that it may be hardest in front of, you know, because you don't want people to judge you for being different. So that made that a little bit easier for me, and I think that that can have a really good influence on other friends who maybe, even if they're not in those same leadership roles, they see you being open about your faith, and they are more comfortable being open about their faith as well.
What are some of the steps that you took to be open? Like you got plugged into leadership roles, which is really cool, but what were some like behind the scenes? In, you know, God says that he sees what's done in the secret place, and so what were some things that you did in secret that helped, or maybe not even in secret, maybe it was like, hey, I'm publicly gonna show you guys how I walk and lead out my faith. What were some of those things that you did?
I would say, so starting out with like the more in secret things, is that it kind of started out, one of the other leadership things, I was on the worship team, and so I'd have to rehearse those worship songs before actually going on, you know, in for service. So when I had to rehearse those worship songs, I remember before that I never really, you know, intentionally listened to worship music that much, like just kind of played it, you know,
Sing the
when I was in the shower.
song,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. But having to rehearse it, that kind of made me like get a feel for what songs do I like in worship music. I actually really like this. I'm going to start listening to this more on my own time. So I'd say just, you know, creating that time, listening to worship music instead of whatever secular music, definitely made a really big impact in my life, because I was able to then start using that as a tool where anytime that I had any kind of anxiety, doubts, or fear or anything, I was able to put on worship music and immediately calm my heart.
Wow.
So that definitely helped a lot. I'd say another thing was just like a lot of prayer, especially for anything that was going on in or out of school, you know, praying for my friends, praying for my teachers, praying for the test that I have tomorrow, things like that. And kind of carrying that on out later on as I would go into school and my friends would be talking to me about whatever's going on. Small comments like, oh, I'll be praying for you, or I'll be praying about that.
Yeah, those like little seeds.
It's actually really powerful because, you know, that's not honestly not the kind of thing that you hear a lot from just your friends. You know, you might hear from a pastor or from, you know, one of your teachers, but to just hear when your friends say, oh yeah, I'll be praying about that, it's so small and quick, but like it really gets them thinking like, oh, like you're gonna pray.
You're gonna pray? Like, are you really gonna do it?
Yeah, exactly.
We really do.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. And so I think that me saying that, and it kind of became something that I said, even if it was not in a joking way, because I would still do it, but like something small where one of my friends would be complaining about something and I would just say like, don't worry, I'll pray about it, you know?
Yeah.
Where it became so common part of our language where then they almost started saying it, you know.
Yeah.
They start saying like, "Oh, make sure you pray about it," and then I'm like, "Hey, you can pray about it too." You know?
Yeah, like, hey, like, let's do it together,
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know? Okay,
So
cool.
I would say things like that, like just kind of inserting small little comments, or
So
even
worship, prayer.
worship, prayer, and even other small comments like, and obviously, you know, we don't want to be judgmental or anything as Christians, of course not, but if you go to a Christian school and you have your friends who proclaim to be being Christians, you want to make sure that if they're proclaiming it, you know, are having that accountability, right with each other. So if we're ever talking about something, they're talking about doing something, if you're able to have that kind of trustworthy relationship with each other and accountability, where you can tell them, maybe in kind of a joking way, but you're not joking, but so that it doesn't sound as harsh, you're just kind of saying like, hey, God's watching, you know, things like that. I think
Yeah.
that helps. You just need to be really careful about it because you also
Yeah.
don't want them to resent you for it. But of course, if you
Absolutely.
care about them, you want to make sure that you're not letting them live in a way that's destructive.
It's like you got to be able to speak truth, but give a lot of grace at the same time, because we're all broken, we're all sinners, like we all fall short of the glory of God, which is, listen, that's a living testimony for me right now. But it's you're right 100%. I've definitely been in a situation where I like asked for forgiveness for this. So I was speaking to somebody who didn't have faith, and I had just like, I was on this like I love God, which is like that in love, like I am so faithful, like I love you, to like all these great things, but it actually caused me to lose friendships because they were like, whoa, like I can't even relate to you, I can't even like be on your level, or if I wear this you're gonna judge me, or this and that. And I'm like, man, that stinks. Like I don't want you, like I'm so sorry I represented myself like that or God like that, because that's not my heart. Like I love you and I want to be there for you. And I think that's cool that you learned that at a young age, because a lot of people don't have that knowledge and that wisdom to give truth and grace, not condemning, but still convicting.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
and as being part of the church, we have to do that.
Yeah,
you know.
of course.
Okay, so what is the third and final thing? So you went negative, positive. Where are we going? Where are we going?
I would say just something that I, you know, kind of personally struggle with, and this is growing up both in Christian schools and just in a Christian family, was, you know, being surrounded by that environment that I told you about, like at the beginning. Sorry, the first point that I had, where it's like, you know, people think that they're a Christian just because they go to Christian school, but they don't actually have the personal relationship. I think that growing up, always hearing the Bible stories, you know, knowing the Bible, knowing about God, and knowing about who God was and everything, kind of created a lot of confusion in my life when I was younger, because there's a big difference between knowing about God and knowing God.
Yeah.
And I
Absolutely.
definitely had to come to that realization on my own, you know, kind of early on, like early middle school, high school, because I started to feel really empty and I didn't know why. Because I was thinking, I go to church, I go to youth group, I go to a Christian school, I read what I have to, you know, for school and everything, for the Bible. I don't understand why I still don't feel like I have God, like, in my heart, in my life. Like, I don't understand. I was so confused because I felt like I was doing everything right. I felt like I already had the head knowledge of everything, but I didn't personally know God because I didn't have that personal relationship with him. That's like that own intentional effort. So then I was able to start working on that once I identified it, but it felt really hard because I felt almost like jealous of people who didn't grow up in the church and were able to just discover God for themselves and then have that like original aha moment with God as soon as, you know, as soon as they encounter God, they know. But for me, it was like, you know, when you meet somebody, you meet them and then you get to know them and know all about them. For me, I feel like I knew all about God and then I met him, which was so backwards, and
Wow.
and it just felt very unnatural for me, and I'm very grateful for it, you know, now looking back, because I feel like now I know God. I know a lot about God because it's what I grew up, you know, knowing, and because of that, I never really like, my faith has always been very strong in the sense that I've never had doubt of like, oh, well, what if God isn't real? Because I've always known that God is real because that's how I grew up thinking. So I'm grateful for it in that sense that I don't have that doubt, but it just felt very hard looking back. And I'm sure that everybody has that same kind of struggle, but a different kind of struggle, you know?
Yeah.
Even when they're starting their faith, but it was weird how I felt almost jealous of people who didn't grow up. And truthfully, like, I was very lucky to have grown up in a place where, you know, your faith is so not only acceptable but appreciated, you know, because not everybody is going to be in households or even countries where living out your faith is acceptable.
Yeah.
So I was really blessed in that sense, but it just felt really hard.
Yeah. Almost like, did you feel alone in a sense that you were the only one that felt like that?
Yes, exactly.
Which is totally a lie, because you weren't alone in feeling like that. I know when I mean, 5th and 6th grade, that was a long time ago, okay? But it was still one of those things where, again, we had the head knowledge, but I didn't have a relationship with God. It was like, okay, again, check off the box. Let's do this, let's do that. But when I stepped back and I just lived in the world, it was interesting because God was like, hey, I need you to come back to me. Like, I want you. And then it made me want God. And I didn't know anything about him. I was like, I just know that you're real. And like your love that I'm experiencing is true. And your peace is true. So that was totally like threw me off guard, because now I'm like, I want to know, I'm going to spend eternity with him. You know, I'm going to be on a new earth in heaven with him, and I want to know everything about him, everything about his character and his love and what he's done for us. And the more that I fall in love with Jesus, the more I want to know who he is. And gosh, I just know that there's so many of my students, because I serve in student ministry, there's so many of my students that are Christians and they go to private Christian schools, but man, they are not living in a way that represents Christ well, like at all. And which is sad, and it breaks my heart. But I can see where God's starting to tug on their heart. Like, hey, like, you know this, so why don't you believe it? Hey, you know this, like, why aren't you acting in this way? The conviction that they really need. So I definitely feel that as part of the sanctification process. But I think it's interesting that you even brought that up, because I never really put that into perspective, where, dang, like, I got to experience, like, you were jealous of me, but I was jealous of you. You know, I was like, dang, I wish I had the knowledge of God before I fell in love with him. But you're like, man, I wish I fell in love with him before I had the knowledge, which is interesting. I think that just goes to everybody's testimony. It's so different. And that's the greatness of God, you know? Like,
absolutely.
And with every person that gets to hear it, we get to, like, overcome the enemy and punch him in the throat.
Yeah, because I feel like it's, exactly. I feel like as a whole, like, the grass is always greener on the other side in the moment, but looking back, like, I wouldn't have changed anything looking back, because that's all a part of your own personal walk. Like you said, everybody's walk is different. Everybody's journey is different. And I wouldn't have been where I am now without it. So.
You're like, the grass is always greener on the other side, and there was something where I was like, oh, the grass may be greener on the other side, but it's fake.
Yes.
And I'm like, oh, or like the grass is green on the other side, but there's like dog poop all in the yard, you know? I'm like, wow, like, I didn't even think about that kind of thing, you know? But that's interesting. Okay, cool. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about what it's like in public school now and see how it relates to Christian school now. I mean, obviously, it's been years since I've been in either.
Right.
Either. Let me not tell my age, okay? But there has to be, I mean, I was experiencing things. I know the first time I heard a cuss word was in private school. The first time that I saw pornography was in private Christian school. First time that I experienced bullying was in Christian private school. So with, like, those things, like, let's say, like, drugs, like, I know that has to be a thing that's still going on. Addiction, sex, pornography, things. What are some things that you saw in Christian school that stood out?
So I would say the thing about Christian school is that, you know, the authorities and everything at Christian school, they will make some efforts in, you know, trying to prevent all of that from happening, maybe more than public schools. But sometimes, you know, students who don't have a relationship with God, they're going to find their way of doing things anyways. So there are students who are smoking in the bathrooms, doing drugs when they're at home, drinking on the weekends, going to parties and things like that. All of these things, like everything that you mentioned, it's still going on. It's just that now, sometimes because they have more things that are stopping them from being able to do it so freely, they're becoming almost more sneaky with it.
Oh, yeah.
Which can be really dangerous. And I mean, it's a sin both ways, whether you're doing it out in the open in public school or doing
in
it
private.
in private school. It's a sin both ways, but now it's like, okay, now not only are you sinning, but you're lying about it too. You're doing it even more in secret, so you're not, maybe some people, they're not able to get the same help that others will be able to get if they're doing it open, because they're not telling anybody about it. So they're not able to get help because maybe they're ashamed about it because they're surrounded by the people convicting them surrounded by them all the time. Whatever teachers are telling them, like, oh, don't do this, don't do that, but they're doing it.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but like when someone used to tell me don't do it, I would want to do it 10 times more. I'm like, well, why don't I want to do it? Well, why isn't that feeling good? So I understand. So with that, what are some things that made you say, like, how did you, I don't know, like, overcome that? Like, I don't want to fall into that. What are some things that, you did?
Yeah, I would say that the biggest thing, and, temptation is real, 100%.
Yeah.
So no matter who you are, no matter how strong you are in your faith, like, you're going to get tempted. Mm-hmm. And so being surrounded by people who are going to be constantly tempting you is only going to make life harder for you.
Yeah.
So finding a good group of people who you can trust to be pouring into you and, who aren't going to be tempting you, but rather are going to be helping you, so you can fill your time with those people doing good things that are going to glorify God.
Yeah.
Rather than being around people who might be trying to drag you, down into the darkness. And there's this analogy actually that I heard, I don't know, years ago in a youth group. And it was talking more about, like, dating if you're unequally yoked, but I think it goes for any really close friendship where you're spending a lot of time with somebody, where it's like, if I'm standing here on this
the chair. Yes,
yes.
yes.
So if I'm sitting here on this chair and you're standing on the ground, it's a lot easier for you to pull me down than me to pull you up, So it's a lot easier for somebody who's in the darkness to pull somebody in the light down. And for somebody who's in the light to pull somebody in the darkness up.
Absolutely.
And it's not impossible because
right.
God is going to work through you. And that's why I'm saying, like, don't cut those people off.
Absolutely.
The people who are in the darkness, like, you need to be a light to them.
We're called to be in the darkness,
exactly,
right? Yeah.
You 100% need to still be spreading light to them, speaking truth into them, letting Jesus speak through you to them. But who are your core people who you are, spending most of your time with, filling your time with? That's what matters, when it comes to making sure that you're not falling into that temptation of the private schools and everything. I think that is, like, one of the biggest things. And in order to do that, you need to pray for a lot of wisdom.
Yeah,
before going,
absolutely.
And, like, God, give me this discernment and wisdom, showing me who's real, who's fake, who's a real Christian, who's, lukewarm, or who's just lying just to, in front of the teachers or the parents.
Yeah.
Who's going to be glorifying you on the weekends, and who's going to be doing absolutely awful things on the weekends and only bringing me into sin.
Yeah.
And then when God gives you that discernment and wisdom, you're going to be able to live life in a lot more peace, a lot easier, knowing that you're not going to have to be worrying about having to fight off that temptation so much, because it gets really hard.
I can't even imagine now, like, it's 10 times worse. I have a really great community of women through the church that have just uplifted me and supported me, and even men that have come alongside my husband and just supported us in marriage, which is great. But I think back to that analogy about the chair, and it's so cool that you knew that, is that Jesus did life with 12, but he did intimate relationship life with 3. And it's like that core group, like you said, is so important, so strong. Like, they're going to be with you in the times of secret and the time of struggle, and I have that group of people, but then I have the people I do life with, which is like everybody. But you also remember, like, Judas was tempted and was still close to Jesus, and so it's like and betrayed Jesus. So I'm like, God, like, help me to not be around people that are going to betray me. Like, I'm praying for, like, my friends and stuff. It's so important.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So what are some of the fruits that you look for in a friendship?
So I would say one of the biggest things two of the biggest things are love and self-control.
That's good.
So with love, you want to make sure that it's somebody who, I look at, like, 1 Corinthians 13, where it says, love is patient. Is this person being patient with you? Kind. Oh, I heard this thing once where it's like, you read through that, love is patient, love is kind, does not envy, does not boast. Those whole verses, if you replace their name with love, is it true? So if you say like, oh, Rose is patient, Rose is kind, Rose is not envy, is that true? That's how you know if this person is truly
What?
loving.
That is fire. What?
Yeah, so I
Okay, that is so good. You're about to change the whole game when it comes to like what? Even I'm gonna put my own name in that. Am I loving my patient? Am I kind?
That's what I have to
Holy
do sometimes.
convicting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Whoa.
So that was like when I heard that was an absolute game changer with like really like self conviction, like you said, just like who are your friends? Even if you're looking for a relationship or something, and you want to see like. Does this person love properly? Does this person live for God? Replace their name. It changes everything. So there's that. And then also self-control because, like I was saying, because you're surrounded by temptation all the time, like, is this person really strong in, fighting against all of those temptations? When they talk, this goes with gentleness too, when they talk, do they talk, angrily? Do they talk about other people? If they're gossiping, big red flag because... Number one, that's not bringing life into your own conversations. But number two, they're probably going to be gossiping about you.
I was about to say, like, listen, behind closed doors,
exactly.
your
so,
name.
like, is that really a trustworthy person? Things like that. Just the language that they use. Is it uplifting? Are they bringing other people down? Are they cursing? Things like that. Like, the conversations that you two have when it's just you two, when you're not around any other parents or authorities, that says a lot about a person.
Wow. Girl. That was it for me right there. That was incredible. Wow. I can't say thanks enough for coming back out a second time and refilming this for me. I'm excited for you for college. I think that the wisdom that God has poured into you and given you the gift of of discernment is so incredibly favorable on your life. It was I heard this really, really, really cool quote from one of my dear friends, Vedline, and she said, "Favor is born from the womb of obedience." And that was just revelation to me. Like, I had the knowledge, but like the revelation of like, as a mom, I physically have given birth to little humans. And I'm like, man, if I continue to stay obedient, I will physically give birth to God's favor over my life. And I know I've talked about this in a previous episode on my podcast, my personal podcast, where we were talking about the fear being the fear of God, to be fearful of him. And it was like, actually, no, it's like the fear of losing his favor and hand over my life is like the thing that I'm scared of the most. And so I really believe that the favor that God has over your life is in abundance, and you're about to go out into a public college, university. Like, she's going to UM. That's crazy, from Christian school to UM. But I really think that God has just equipped you and given you the discernment and the strength, self-control, love, joy, patience, all these amazing gifts of the Spirit that you need to be able to step out into the darkness. So I'm really excited for you, girl.
Thank you so much.
God's going to do great things.
Great being here again. I'm so glad.
Yeah.
It was a really amazing experience. So I'm really excited for everything that Young in Faith has in store.
It's going to be awesome because we're going to have you back on in like
so
a year.
excited.
As soon as you get back from
so
UM, it's going to be like, yo, what was it like? Okay? I'm going to be like, so thank you guys so much for tuning in. We love having you guys on the platform, being a part of Young in Faith. What you can do is you can subscribe. That's a way to support us. You can leave a comment. You can check us out on other social media. Share this content if it was something that really spoke to you, even if it was a specific part of the clip that spoke to you. The whole point is that God is reaching you through this. It's not about us. It's always about the Lord. And we just want to make sure that it glorifies him in this conversation, glorified him in all things. So, Gary, thank you for having us on. We appreciate you. You the man. And, we'll see you next time. Peace out.